overnight, saying that the pardons that were issued by President Biden preemptively to members of the January 6th committee, that they're now null and void. Have attorneys here at the White House told President Trump that he has the legal authority to undo a pardon simply because it was signed by auto pen, as he said?
The president was begging the question that I think a lot of journalists in this room should be asking about whether or not the former president of the United States, who I think we can all finally agree was cognitively impaired. I know it took people some time to finally admit that, but we all know that to be true, as evidenced by his disastrous debate performance against President Trump during the campaign. I digress on that. But the president was raising the point that did the president even know about these pardons? Was his legal signature used without his consent or knowledge? And that's not just the president or me raising those questions, Caitlin. According to the New York Post, there are Biden officials from the previous White House who raised those questions and wondered if the president was even consulted about his legally binding signature being signed onto documents. And so I think it's a question that everybody in this room should be looking into, because certainly that would propose perhaps criminal or illegal behavior if staff members were signing the president of the United States autograph without his consent.
Biden is on the record talking about issuing preemptive pardons to these people.
But was he aware of his signature being used on every single pardon? That's a question you should ask the Biden White House.
Is there any evidence on that he wasn't aware of it?
You're a reporter. You should find out.
Okay,
Sean.
Well, you just heard it. The press secretary who speaks for the Trump administration just admitted that they have absolutely no evidence to support Donald Trump's defamatory statement that Joe Biden, when he was president, didn't actually sign or know that he was signing pardons. And therefore, because he was, quote unquote, as the press secretary just claimed, mentally incompetent, all the reporters in the room should get on trying to ferret out any information or evidence to support Trump's assertion that he can overturn pardons because they were signed with an auto pen. Michael Popok with follow-up of my prior reporting. Carolyn Levitt took to the podium today. It always reminds me of the North Koreans when I see this particular press secretary starting to defend the administration. In particular, she decided that it was time for the press to do their job. Now remember, this is the same press secretary who frequently chastises the press for asking tough questions. You guys are bulldogs and you won't let go of a question. And even when you don't get an answer, you keep following up, and she gets all perturbed about it. Like when they were trying to get to the bottom of who was the head of Doge. Is it Elon Musk or is it someone else? And now she turns around in a complete sign of she's just walking insecurity wrapped in walking contradictions. Now she's telling the press, I don't have any evidence. The administration doesn't have any evidence that Joe Biden didn't know what he was signing. And therefore, but they should get to the bottom of it. You're reporters, she reminded them, as the media continues to be under attack in the Trump administration. Let's break this down for a moment. There is absolutely no evidence to suggest that Joe Biden didn't use the auto pen mechanism himself to sign the dozens and dozens and dozens of orders and pardons and clemencies towards the end of his administration. None. And there's a very good reason presidents use the auto pen mechanism. Trump used it 30 times. Obama almost set the record using it. And George W. Bush did it too, including on pardons. They got a lot of documents to sign. It's almost impossible to replicate your signature, 50, 100, 150 times in a row. Do I want the president of the United States doing that? But he can ensure, they actually use the pen while they're there. They're not out golfing like Donald Trump has suggested, or mentally impaired. And then when Carolyn Levitt says, the New York Post it's not a legitimate journalistic outlet. It is a squawk box for Rupert Murdoch and the Trump administration. It's no more legitimate than Fox News is. So to point to then New York Post as an echo chamber for the administration's fever dreams is ridiculous and insulting. And that's why they're asking those hard questions. His argument is that because Joe Biden used the same auto pen mechanism that Trump used, that Obama used, that George Bush has used, that his pardons are somehow invalid. Let's remind everybody, pardons which are the ultimate in presidential power and authority under Article 2 of the Constitution, a core presidential function that cannot be challenged. Those are not my words. Those are the words of the Supreme Court of the United States. They don't have to be in writing at all. They just have to be a clear manifestation of intent to pardon. Every pardon or clemency issued, for instance, by Joe Biden, just like every president before him, he either gave a press conference to announce it, gave a speech to announce it, and or a written proclamation from the White House on White House electronic stationery announcing it. That is a clear manifestation of an unambiguous exercise of the pardon power. So for Carolyn Levitt, the mouthpiece for the Trump administration, I think her title is World's Youngest Press Secretary, to start debating the press after having admitted that Donald Trump was just speaking rhetorically in his postings this morning. Let me put that post back up. The rantings of the sleepy Joe Biden. Somehow somebody grabbed the pen out of his hand and was signing pardons that he wanted to sign. Does anybody legitimately think that Joe Biden didn't actually want to pardon the Jan 6th special committee, the special committee on Jan 6th, that all of its chair people and all of its members and all of its staff and his own family and Hunter Biden and Mark Milley, the general, or Anthony Fauci? There's no evidence to suggest that. He talked about it ad nauseum at every length, at every time he could, from Election Day through January 20th. And written proclamations that support it. That's it. That's all that's required. There is no constitutional requirement that it be in writing nor signed. They're trying to argue some sort of, it needs to be a wet pen signature, a wet ink signature. Where does it say that in the Constitution? Now, what did that do to all the 30 things that Donald Trump signed, and including executive orders that didn't have that wet ink signature? That auto pen has been used, for over 100 years. I defy anybody watching this hot take and listening to Carolyn Levitt to sit down right now and shuffle papers and put 50 pieces of paper in front of you and sign each one of them in a reasonable amount of time without looking at your signature over and over and over again, and see if you can do it in a way that makes it look legitimate. And you know what would have happened had they not used the auto pen. It would have been, signature 12 doesn't match the 20th signature or the 30th signature or the 40th signature. This is just, again, the Trump administration from a bully pulpit led by a half-wit in the press secretary, attacking Joe Biden and his legacy on the way out. It's not enough that their legacy is circling the drain, that more than less than 40%, or just about 40% of the American people, meaning 60% of the American people, think Donald Trump's doing a terrible job. And they celebrate that. It's the highest. His low is the highest he's ever had. Yeah. For them, it's an accomplishment that he's even crossed the 40% barrier in polling. So they're trying to detract from that. Their legacy is circling the drain already. It's one of the worst presidential starts in history, but they're not done. They want to continue to crap all over Joe Biden and his legacy, and that of the quote unquote liberals who are responsible for all the accomplishments during the Biden administration. You got to really, it pains me to have to listen through the press secretary and her statements. It's so obviously political. It's so obviously just pravda and truth according to Trump, having no aversion of reality. Wait till I do my hot take on what she said during a press conference. It's going to show up in court today at 5:00 with Judge Boasberg about all the flights that took off in violation of the court order on their way to Honduras and El Salvador. That'll make your eyes pop out. So listen, at the end of the day, you have the Trump administration constantly trying to deflect when there's bad news around the Trump administration, like the polling issue, like, 60% of America think he's terrible, or think his economic policies are terrible, or think his foreign policy is terrible, or not doing anything or enough for them. When you have that, they're always going to come out with some attack on the Biden administration. That's all we've watched. That's all we've seen. That whole 40-minute press conference was just a tap dance and a shiny object, so the reporters get off of the bad news about Trump and get on to Biden again. That's why, right on cue, Trump, who's so often accused of not writing his own social media posts, we know that from the Jan 6 committee, gets somebody to write some all caps thing in the morning, and that leads the press on a wild goose chase. We're not on a wild goose chase. We're on Legal AF. I appreciate you being here. Look forward to my next updated reporting about the hearing at 5 o'clock later today in front of Judge Boasberg, when the lawyers for the Trump administration are going to have to answer as to why they're not in contempt for having flown planes to El Salvador, to some of the worst prisons in the world, and in Honduras, in violation of a court order. Come back here. I'll tell you all about it at the end of that hearing. I'm Michael Popok, and I'm reporting. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event, by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states, and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice every step of the way.